What is up, everybody? We are going into week 3 of the NFL season, and we have a lot of managers that are going to be fed up about three particular stud players, three wide receivers that we are going to look into and talk about. People are upset they're not getting the production that they should be getting. And so these guys are openly available on the market for the most part. So before we get into it, guys, do me a quick favor there. Smash that like for me. Smash that subscribe if you're new and you play fantasy football. But let's get right into it. First guy up is going to be the stud Jamar Chase, who is going at the 102, 103 in most leagues, right after JJ, as the next wide receiver off the board. And he's been disappointing. I mean, 8 targets, 5 catches, 31 yards in week 2, 9 targets, 5 for 39 in week 1. Things have just not went Jamar Chase's way, or the Bengals for that part. Joe Burrow dealing with the calf injury, re-aggravating that. Hopefully he doesn't miss any time, but people are upset already with Jamar Chase, and people want points now. So we need to take advantage and shop around and see if Jamar Chase is available. Watch the whole video because at the end, I will give you some guys that you can look to trade up for Jamar Chase and these other two wide receivers that we'll talk about next. Let's get into wide receiver number 2, which is going to be A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. People are already a little upset about what they're getting. 7 catches on 10 targets for 79 yards in week 1. And then week 2 follows that up with 4 catches on 6 targets for 29 yards. And we've seen Devonta Smith just go off these first 2 games. So A.J. Brown owners are very upset right now, and they're looking for some points. They might want to move off of A.J. Brown. So we need to look into acquiring A.J. Brown from some of these teams, especially if they're an 0-2 team or maybe even 1-1. Should have had the touchdown this past week, but that was called back due to penalty. Just like Jamar Chase, he's getting targets. They're just not converting at the moment. We have plenty of time for that to happen. No need to panic right now. We know these are some of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And let's move on to our third guy, which is going to be Jalen Waddle, Miami Dolphins. We've seen Cheetah just go off with Tua lately, but we haven't seen it from Jalen Waddle. 4 for 78 on 5 targets in game 1. In game 2, 4 for 86 on 6 targets. Just not enough of what we want. He's been decent. He's giving you decent amount of points, but being where he was drafted, he's not giving you that return that you really expected for Jalen Waddle in this offense so far, because everything is just going through Cheetah at the moment. But as we get into the season, more and more teams are going to prepare to try and stop Cheetah, which is going to leave Jalen Waddle open and have an opportunity to produce a lot of fantasy points. We've seen Jalen Waddle do it both ways already. We've seen him do it the PPR way, and we've seen him do it the yards after catch way. So we know what kind of wide receiver Jalen Waddle is. Go out and get him now while he's still relatively cheap before he does have that big game. We've already got excuses for these guys to use. For Jamar Chase, it's T. Higgins, how he went off and Jamar Chase didn't, how Joe Burrow is suffering through the calf injury, and that might linger on this whole season. So Chase is a risk. When you look at Jalen Waddle, you can talk about how Cheetah is just the main guy there, and he's taking all the targets. So Waddle is always just going to be this kind of middling wide receiver. And then you can talk about A.J. Brown. You can talk about Devonta Smith, how he's just kind of taking all the targets. He's taking all the touchdowns. He's getting the majority of the work. He's the one that's going off. So A.J. Brown is always going to have this kind of ceiling, and he's not going to be consistent for you. These are all points that you can use to try and acquire one of these players. So now we get into the big question, guys. Who can we trade to get one of these stud players? Let's look at some of the guys that we can possibly trade to try and tier up. And we're going to have to add something else to these players, whether it's an extra wide receiver or a running back added on into this deal to try and make this deal work. Because that GM is obviously going to want a wide receiver in return, plus something else to make them want to make this deal happen. So who can we give up to try and acquire these players? Puka Nacua, does he continue to do what he's doing? Does Cooper Kupp come back? Do things change for Puka? Does he become a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 once Cooper Kupp comes back? Mike Evans, a guy who's been on a tear basically these first 2 games. Does Baker Mayfield keep that up? Is he the new Geno Smith this year? Or does Mike Evans actually come back down to earth? I do still think, he's one of those 1,000-yard wide receivers, but he can't give you what Waddle or Chase or A.J. Brown can give you. Nico Collins, he's obviously been on a tear. Keenan Allen is one that I think is going to have a very good season, but does he actually finish the whole season? Being a little bit older in age. We saw last year the hamstring injury, which sidelined him for a long amount of time. And hopefully that doesn't happen again this year. But he is a guy that you can use to tier up to one of these other guys. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, with all the weapons they have in that offense, it's not going to be as consistent as we want it to be. Michael Pittman, Devontae Adams, George Pickens, Garrett Wilson, Tyler Lockett. Now, again, we are going to have to add something else to this deal, whether it is another wide receiver or whether it is a running back or tight end or quarterback, whatever the situation may be. But the most important thing, what you're going to have to do is take a look at what teams have these players and look at those teams. So who has a Jamar Chase, who has Jalen Waddle, who has A.J. Brown? And then take a look at that team and say, what does this team need that I can give them that might make sense for this GM to accept this trade? Do they need a running back? So now you can use a running back from your roster to use in that trade to make that trade happen. Are their wide receivers thin because they were banking on this top wide receiver to kind of bail them out, and that's not happening? So can you give up 2 wide receivers? Can you give up a tight end to help them in their situation? Can you give up a quarterback to help them in their situation? So look at the team and see where that weakness is, and then attack from there and give up what you need to try and make the deal happen. That will wrap it up for this video, guys. Let me know what you think down there in the comments. Are you trying to go after some of these guys? Chase, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle? Do the GMs in your league that have these guys, are they looking to trade them? Do you think maybe you can pry one of these guys away? And do you have any of the guys that I mentioned that you can use to tier up here? Tell me what you think about it in the comments below. Before y'all get out of here, just do me a quick favor. Drop that like, smash that subscribe if you're new, and I'll see y'all on the next one.